This video is sponsored by my Discord server. Click the link in the description below and join the Raptorverse today. Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and things are gonna be a bit different this time. Death Battle Season 10 has come to an end, and normally around now I would give a big one-by-one ranking of all of the episodes. We're not doing that today, per se. And please try to understand, I wanted to do it. It honestly would have been in my best interest analytics-wise, I'm well aware. But as this season went on, I became more and more unwilling. Not just because it got so hard for me to even decide on a ranking, but also because it seems like a really reductive way to say how I feel about this season. I believe Season 10 has done something incredibly special. If I don't talk about it as a whole, I don't think I'd be able to get my main thoughts across. So instead, I decided to make more of a retrospective on everything, still talk lots about the episodes, but also the season itself and my general feelings towards whatever I have strong feelings about. And I gotta say, I feel a lot better about making the video like this, at least for this year, so if you want to stick around, I appreciate that so much, and if not, I'll probably go cry in a corner. Alright, with that out of the way, let's do this. I want to start off talking about the matchup selection since it's easy to get out of the way first, and for the most part, I think it was pretty great. This season had 15 new franchises introduced, about the same as Season 9, and even aside from that, a lot of the battle choices were quite refreshing and unique. Some definitely got backlash by a sector of the community upon announcement, but others some people lost their minds for, and on a personal level, I don't think I could have gotten it much better. There were battles I had put in various Dream Season videos, which were awesome to see come to life. There were 3 Marvel vs. DC fights that were frustrating to have so close together, but they all actually got me excited individually and for their own reasons, which was unexpected. There were episodes with series I didn't know that well but loved learning about. Oh, and also, my 2 most wanted episodes ever! Needless to say, I didn't have many reasons to complain matchup by matchup, but what about the productions themselves? Remember, of course, that these are just my thoughts, there's no right or wrong to any of this stuff, our opinions can coexist. Anyway, in terms of straight production, these 4 to me stood out as the weakest of the bunch, and it's only because they weren't so good like everything else. They still have their own merits to me, I enjoy them every time I watch them, and compared to some other seasons, they hold up quite well. Most of the Marvel vs. DCs are pretty normal for their kind, but they had enough going for them. Ant-Man vs. Atom does really well with the visuals, and Phoenix vs. Raven goes pretty deep with the analyses. And speaking of analyses, I particularly like Killua vs. Misaka's emphasis on the characters' arcs and relationships with other characters. That drives home what makes them interesting, and it got me invested in them during the fight. I appreciate how they spent real time on showing us what makes them who they are, and the same goes for Manhunter vs. Surfer, but even more so. I think this episode does fall a little short in some normal death battle aspects, but as a Marvel and DC fan, I actually love how they handled it. These two are not your normal death battle combatants. The writing illustrates that so well in the analyses, and it bleeds into the animation in the best way possible. It is true to the characters in a different but super effective way, so have it be known that I really like this episode, it's just that comparing it directly to the other ones is a little hard to do. Again, I enjoy all of these, they just don't reach the level of everything else to me, and that level is pretty fucking good, I gotta tell ya. If you really want me to pull out some personal nitpicks from episode to episode, sure, let's get them out of the way first. I think Skyrim vs. Dark Souls ending is quite a bit confusing for those who don't know the series too well, and it didn't really have to be. Putting more focus on the actual death or the shot right after would have been much better for clarity. I really do not agree with Death Battle's decision to focus more on Star Wars canon for Vader when that has not been the standard for those characters for a long time. It feels so out of place after the last few seasons, and especially when it very well may have affected the outcome of the fight. Yeah, that's just too much of a deviance for my taste. Getting so much Marvel vs. DC together was annoying. I wouldn't be surprised if it was just due to unfortunate rescheduling, but when only one of them really stands out, it is kind of unavoidable. I can understand some people's frustration with the specific conclusions of fights like Bill vs. Discord and Gojo vs. Makima. Little bits of them seem kinda shaky to me too. Although Death Battle was gonna gonna have to make tough calls either way, so I respect them sticking to their guns, and I can still get behind their decisions as a whole. I think the humor in Cole vs. Alex, while not coming from a bad place, does get a little too repetitive as it really focuses on the edginess of the two series and the time period they came from. I think that kind of humor was necessary, but not that much. The analyses should not prioritize how old and dated the characters might feel over other stuff that's actually important for understanding them. This is gonna be unpopular, but I think the pacing in the Frieza vs. Megatron animation could have been improved. I understand why there's so much stopping and starting and how it directly references the series. I just think there could have been a bit less of it. You really need a good balance with that kind of thing, and I don't know, I just think it could have been brushed up a tad. I think Rick vs. the Doctor had just a little untapped potential technology-wise, although I assume it's because the hand-drawn animation style took up a lot of that time. And to bring up one more thing, I have quite mixed feelings on the whole Cipher Wheelstick for this season. On paper, I think it's a great change from the combatant reveals we'd gotten prior, and it was fun to theorize what the symbols and text could mean. But as things kept going, it became very clear that these symbols were not meant to lead you in any sort of right direction. Their connection to their matchup could have been anything, and often was more minor than expected. I'm not saying the matchup should have been obvious based on the symbols, but I don't think it's a good thing when nearly every episode announcement was followed up with disagreements about what the symbol was. I mean, it's supposed to be something you could decipher, right? As I'm recording this, there are still a few symbols I'm not 100% sure of, but again, I definitely think this was a fun idea and could have been way worse. Just know that from a fan's perspective, it didn't unfold exactly as I had expected. But now, we basically just have the good stuff left to talk about. The thing is, I'm one of those Death Battle fans who actually likes the show, so most episodes don't really bother me to the point where they're ruined. But it really is more than that this time. I still love seasons 8 and 9, but this one, especially the second half, amped it up beyond belief. Both Guts vs. Dimitri and Skyrim vs. Dark Souls have reaffirmed just how good Death Battle is handling more fantasy-like worlds, just like Sauron vs. Lich King. And even then, they have their standout attributes. Skyrim vs. Dark Souls combines a kick-ass fight with well-told information about the gameplay and lore, while Guts vs. Dimitri combines a kick-ass fight with an amazing presentation of the proper emotional significance. They have a lot of flash, but they also manage to be quite a bit more than that, and that's what makes episodes so memorable. Definitely high up there for me. Vader vs. Obito had so much more going on than Obi-Wan vs. Kakashi that I'm surprised the animation quality pretty well matched my hopes. And while I may not agree with all of the decisions, the analyses to me are so well constructed for outlining their falls from grace, their redemptions, and just what makes them so badass. And the way they pay it off in the ending too, very much appreciated for a fan of both of them like me. I still think there was a ton of effort put into showing off Cole and Alex's stories, and even more than that, their mindsets. I absolutely love how both their analyses start off with a great power, great responsibility quote, and then the animation includes a Spider-Man Green Goblin conversation closer to the end. Like, that's not something you come up with if you don't care. Death Battle knew exactly what set these guys apart and ran with it. Oh, and the fight gets really fucking dope too. Everyone knows that. Frieza vs. Megatron thankfully proved to be another up-to-par Dragon Ball episode, and a successful step up for diving into Transformers. It has good writing, decent jokes, a relatively well-done fake-out moment, and that sweet villain monologuing that fits these two and is basically required for all fights in this realm. This one is also notably elevated by the scope of the animation and the performances. Presentation-wise, there is not much more I could ask from it. Gojo vs. Makima serves as another example of being just as good an introduction to the series as it is to the characters. Their significance in their series is very well described in the script, and honestly, so is everything else, at least in terms of making things fluid and easy to understand. And they did not hold back in showing off their best stuff in the fight, especially Gojo. This holds up as one of their cooler anime versus anime battles. Rick versus the Doctor somehow felt like such a true and faithful crossover between Rick and Morty and Doctor Who. It gave us a real adventure to follow, and moving from set piece to set piece so naturally made it feel like we were watching TV. I don't know how else to describe it. That and being able to go over so much information while still shedding enough light on who the characters are deserves major props. Also, before I forget, the tracks this season overall were quite fantastic. Thairwolf and Brandon continue to make music that is both hard-hitting and appropriate for the matchups themselves. I want to listen to all of the tracks on their own more than ever, which is an amazing sign. I think the one I've listened to the most is God's Hand, but I don't think I could pick too many favorites. I love so many of them for their own reasons. There were so many individual shots, moments, and lines of dialogue that absolutely floored me. The voice acting, the editing, even most of the general writing, it all does the job wonderfully. And for me, the episodes that are simply the cream of the crop for this insane season have to be these guys. Death Battle clearly had so much time allocated to them and work put into them to the point that I could see all of them being in a few people's top 10 favorite episodes of all time. Bill vs. Discord shocked me with how insane an animation could be in as many ways as it was. And the fourth wall breaking nature allowed the personality of this episode to burst through at all times. There is simply never a dull moment here. Being a champion poll episode and essentially the poster matchup for this season, it was clear Death Battle was putting a lot towards it. I think it paid off immensely. It's so great when they really understand the characters and utilize them to their fullest. And I don't think I'll be offending too many people when I say that this is one of the best examples of that to date. Likewise, I think Scooby vs. Courage is one of the best examples of embracing the source material and implementing it flawlessly. The analyses strike a perfect balance of outlining who the characters are and the craziness they can accomplish, and the animation brilliantly does the exact same thing. It starts with them running away from a monster, goes through all the main tropes, escalates to this, all in this beautiful hand-drawn style and 3D background. It's just... yes! This is what a cartoon episode should strive to be at its core, and the fact that it ends in a draw after so much craziness somehow makes it even better. There is just no reason to hate this. Everything is amazing, everything is wonderful. I had to watch it a couple times to fully see it, but Goku vs. Superman had the insane, super in-depth analyses I have always wanted from this show. Even if the animation didn't go unbelievably hard, this would have still made for a perfect depiction of what Goku vs. Superman represents and how far they have gone as characters. I don't blame myself for not being the most excited when it got announced, but Death Battle not only proved that it was worth it, but that they could make it one of their best again. We can finally say that we have a definitive Goku vs. Superman that works in every way, which is exactly what the crew wanted. To be upset at that would just be ridiculous. I doubt Galactus vs. Unicron will be as universally loved as the other three. Some people might see it as more one note or basic for an episode. But what Death Battle presented to us is what Galactus vs. Unicron is. It's chaos. It's incomprehensible in scale and power. That's what this looks like to me. The analyses pulled no punches in describing these guys' danger and what they truly are. Galactus is a hungry lone survivor. Unicron is the evilest thing to exist. Capturing the scope and the essence of these characters was required for this to not fall apart. That was my biggest worry over 8 years of waiting. But I was convinced I was watching the ends of everything living up to the legends, and not just in the animation. A literally huge finale to the huge accomplishment that was season 10. Okay, I think that about wraps up everything. Thank you all so much for— I'm just kidding. I could never forget about you. This is part of the reason why I didn't want to do a full ranking, because I cannot view Stitch vs. Rocket the same way as the rest. I will say this episode turned out a bit more divisive than I expected. Some people were disappointed or underwhelmed, and I can't even imagine how depressed I would be if I felt that way. Yes, I am biased as hell towards it, but I also know a lot of other people who say it's great and that they love it, and I completely agree. The portrayals of these characters were perfect throughout the entire video. The jokes worked perfectly for these characters. The tone and direction in general were nailed on the head. The production itself felt so appropriate for this, from the analysis writing to their sprites to their fighting styles, and fucking Space Hawaii, like look at this shit. And obviously it goes without saying that the music, when it comes to Stitch and Rocket, needed to deliver in the ways that are true to them. And it also goes without saying that it did. I could nitpick if I really wanted to, I'm sure, but frankly, I'm not really in the mood to hinder my natural enjoyment of it just for the sake of a video. As someone who knows these characters very well and loves them to death, there's pretty much nothing I would change about what we got. And I know people love to get angry over their disagreements for some reason, but if you're genuinely upset that I loved the episode I wanted to see more than literally any other episode, just understand that I'm not going to be able to take that seriously. This is, and forever will be, my death battle. I ultimately decided to make this video because I wanted to talk about something I love without having to worry about quantifying anything. For something like this show that takes so much constant work to pull off, especially when it's this good, that's honestly not the most important thing in my mind. Rather, I wanted to express my appreciation for how Death Battle is always putting their best foot forward, and the quality of their stuff is just unreal these days. I hope everyone was able to get this kind of enjoyment from these episodes, because if not, I think they're missing out. From both a biased and unbiased perspective, this season just means so much to me, and I think I can say for sure has become my favorite. I don't know if season 11 will be better or even as good, but I have hope, and even if it's not, it won't detract from my love for this show. I've said before that the only thing that would make me give up on Death Battle is if they just stopped trying. And despite how much shit some people give them every year, you gotta see that they care about what they're doing. And that makes me care too. Thank you for watching my videos. I hope you all have a great year ahead of you.
All of these powers are a thing without a blast. With gadgets and gizmos, we're gonna come. Trying to stop me, we're having a blast. We are having a blast. We are having a blast.